Man, I used to lie all type. They'll ask me, your parents Nigerian? Nah, I'll be like, no, my parents, they are born in America. Yeah, they are from America. They was born in Chicago too.
I am African. I'm Liberian. Growing up, while in the United States, I was always bullied.
When I first moved to the United States, I actually went to boarding school. That was my introduction to the United States. I went to a predominantly white, affluent school in that type of neighborhood. And something that I've realized recently from conversations with my mother about this is how that is a type of trauma that I would not wish on my worst enemy.
What would be your advice to a young African who's immigrating to the United States today?
Ultimately, you can't change who you are. And I think the biggest obstacle is that when people come to the U.S., they kind of alienate their original and they conform to what's there. And when you do that, first of all, you will never get accepted.
But isn't that the best way to integrate?
Absolutely not. Because first of all, you can't, it's no way you can move forward and you're not you.
Do you consider yourself today? Are you American? Are you African? Are you African American? What are you?
I'm an African raised in America. You know, clearly.
So you're not American?
I wish I was, but my mind is not African. I mean American. It's clearly African.
But you have the accent. You have,
you know, I went to school in America. All my whole earlier childhood, I was raised in Africa. Then I came to America. Every summer, we would go back to Africa for a vacation. And then when I graduated high school, it was a choice whether we wanted to go to Africa or stay in the U.S. And just the opportunities in the U.S. was so much greater than Africa.
Well, you're certainly the perfect example of the American dream coming true. And, you know, what would be your advice to a young African who's immigrating to the United States today?
Ultimately, you can't change who you are. And I think the biggest obstacle is that when people come to the U.S., they kind of alienate their original and they conform to what's there. And when you do that, first of all, you will never get accepted.
But isn't that the best way to integrate?
Absolutely not. Because first of all, you can't, it's no way you can move forward and you're not you.
I am African. I had show and tell. So I'm telling my mom about show and tell and how I have to bring something to show and tell, and it could be anything. Okay, so my mom surprises me and brings me a kid dashiki and makes me wear it in front of everybody at show and tell. So I put on the dashiki, and immediately it was a joke fest. They laughed and laughed and laughed at me. And I was up there just, on the inside, I was just dying on the inside. And y'all, this is like second or third grade. And I remember I was at Overton Elementary School in Salisbury, North Carolina. And those kids picked at me so bad. Y'all, when I said I didn't want to come back to school the next day, and it kind of traumatized me because they were calling me African booty scratcher forever. Me and all my cousins, they call us the Africans. Oh, your house smells funny. I'm like, so ignorant. Now those same people are listening to Afro beats and dating African men. Y'all, I can't make this up. I can't.
Man, I used to be so embarrassed to be Nigerian, man. It's crazy. I used to lie all the time in school. They'll ask me where I'm from. Remind you, I've lived in Nigeria for like 5 years, and I moved out here to America. I was born in Chicago, moved to Nigeria, and came back. When I came back, I had the strongest accent, and they'll ask me, where you from? I'll be like, I'm from Chicago. They were like, boy, no, you're not. You from Africa. I'm like, no, I'm from Chicago. I was born in Chicago. Like, no, you wasn't. Man, I used to lie all type. They'll ask me, your parents Nigerian? Nah, I'll be like, no, my parents, they are born in America. Yeah, they are from America. They was born in Chicago too. Boy, them kids knew I was lying too. Bro, they used to clown Nigerian kids, bro, like ridiculous. Like, they used to call us all type of jokes in the book, like, non-stop, bro. Like, it got to a point I had to start fighting, bro. I got tired of hearing them jokes. I had to start fighting. But it's crazy because once we hit puberty, high school, college, now everybody love Nigerians. They want to be Nigerian. They want a Nigerian man. Like, this the same girls who used to, like, clown you in 5th, 6th grade. Now everybody want to be a part of the culture. It's crazy. I'm just saying this just to let y'all know, be proud of where you from, man. Whole time people probably just want to be a part of your culture. That's all it is, or they just jealous of you. Don't hide your culture. Be proud, wear it strong. Man, it took me a minute to learn. I used to be like ashamed just because of the way people used to talk. I ain't want to come to school eat Nigerian food. Now everybody want to try Nigerian food. Now everybody love it. I used to like hide Nigerian food from my friends and stuff like that just to fit in with my friends. Man, y'all be proud of who you are, man. Cause bro, at the end of the day, that's where you from. You can't change where you from. They're gonna love you or they're gonna hate you.
Because I'm a first-generation immigrant to the United States, a conversation that I've always been privy to is that of jumping classes. A lot of immigrant parents, specifically African and Asian immigrant parents, invest quite a lot in making sure that their kids have a better life than they do. And one of the ways in which they do that is by sending them to really, really good schools. When I first moved to the United States, I actually went to boarding school. That was my introduction to the United States. I went to a predominantly white, affluent school in that type of neighborhood. And something that I've realized recently from conversations with my mother about this is how that is a type of trauma that I would not wish on my worst enemy, because this trauma was on multiple folds. The first is the immigrant story. In Nigeria, we're told that the United States, the streets are made with gold. The opportunities are plenty. You're sold a literal dream. You come here and you realize what America has a plenty in creature comforts and things that make your life easier. It's severely lacking in spirit and things that fulfill your soul. People are just so anxious and depressed and unhappy here. And it's not because they're weaker psychologically, but because in a lot of ways, American society needs you to be just this lonely, sad person. Capitalism gnaws at your spirit. The other fold is being in spaces where it's predominantly people that don't look like you and to whom you don't fit within their imagination of what it is to be a person or someone that should be a person in society. And so in a lot of ways, in order for you to do well in these type of environments, these affluence, not of color environments, you have to hate yourself. And this is why I feel a lot of grace for young kids of color that grow up in predominantly white neighborhoods, because you don't understand that, trust me, life has dealt with them. They don't fit in with their own communities because of their proximity to whiteness and the perceptions that come with it. And they definitely don't fit in with the white community because they are not white. And so you leave these kids in a permanent state of limbo. That's a whole other conversation of where they just like don't know who they are. And the third piece, and the most important piece when it comes to this notion of rising classes and immigrants, parents that send their kids to these predominantly white and affluent schools, all for the explicit purpose of upward mobility, is you don't realize how narrow and rigid class classifies people. And so when you are in a higher socioeconomic class, life becomes black and white. You become the type of person that says things like, why didn't you just pay your bills? You know you're gonna get in trouble. Why didn't you just do the right thing? You know you're gonna get in trouble. Because they've never had to face the nuance and complexities of life in which we are forced to do things that we wouldn't otherwise want to do. And so as people and individuals that don't fit into the common structures and rigidness of that class, in order for you to fit in, unless you were born in this world, you have to tone down a huge piece of who you are, especially if you come from a culture like mine, which we're just so naturally gregarious people and lively and open and just very, like, definitely not reserved. And so when it comes to immigrant parents, African parents, Asian parents, whomever, that invest so much in their kids to go to these good schools and have upward mobility, make those friends, I don't think they factor in or they realize that it's not sufficient to just say, here's the tuition, here's the scholarship, go to this school, have a better life for yourself. We are immigrants, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure our kids do well. They don't understand that like that's not enough in those settings, and there's so many layers of trauma and shame and disdain for oneself that is needed in order to do well in these environments. And in a lot of ways, moving up classes requires you to have your spirit broken in many ways. It isn't, we don't give people enough credit, people that really make it from the bottom and go and jump social classes, and maybe not credit, but we don't recognize really like how much of themselves needed to be stripped down and stripped bare and built back up again in order for that to happen. And they are not the same person that started that journey. Yeah.
Grew up in Harlem, right? So my parents migrated. So what is now Red Rooster was the Empire Bar. That was the watering hole of my family and the place where Georgetonians from South Carolina met. It was like the meeting place. So if you were coming from Georgetown, they told you to meet them at the Empire Bar. And so I can remember growing up in Harlem. I got my first library card from County College. I went to John B. Rushroom Elementary School. And when I started learning the significance of some of these names, I was just like, why didn't anybody ever tell me about this? But more importantly, it's been my family. My father, my mother, my uncle, all of my elders have been very specific about making sure that they expose me. Living in a city like New York, you can't help but be exposed to history and culture. So my first library card was like a driver's license, right? And then I grew up right up the block from the Schomburg, which was a mystery to me as a kid. Young people couldn't go in my day. So I would cry and ask my uncle, why can't I go into the library? Like, what is in there? So I feel like it really is part of my DNA. Like, I've just been very impassioned. You know, there's still so many people across the world that don't understand the full breadth and scope and history of the African diaspora. There's still a need for storytellers. There's still a need for preserving history.